Hi, it's Lee from ColouringQueen.net, and today I want to show you my Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers. Now these came out in 2016 and that's when I bought them. They were on special at the time, launch special, so I bought these, and you might remember my unboxing video of them. So they come in 4 packets that have 12 in each packet. They're named Seascape, Landscape, Figure and Sketching. And then they come in 8 packets of 6. So we have the basics, the portrait, earth and tints, essentials and tones, and neutral and hues. Now there's 96 markers altogether in these packets, but the actual set is 216 markers. So the balance you have to purchase individually. The other thing with the Spectrum Noir colouring system is it's an actual colouring system. So they label their markers according to colour families. And there's 29 colour families, but the packets aren't necessarily in a colour family. Now Spectrum Noir have a range of markers. They have some in their Colorista range, which is sort of more their entry-level colouring. Then they have the original colouring system markers, which are these round ones, and they're available in 196 colours for memory, and you can get them in little packets of 12 or so markers. Same sort of thing as this, 12 markers in a packet or 6 in a packet, but just different sort of packaging. But there is a difference between the markers. So first of all, the Illustrator have a larger range. They also have a different barrel, but the most important thing about the Illustrator markers is that they have a different nib. So the nib on the original colouring system, so the brush component, had a chisel tip at one end, and it still does, you can still buy this system, and a bullet nib at the other end. Now for colourists, the ideal type of nib is a brush nib, so one that's got a flexible brush so you can move the colour around. If we have a look at these markers, you can see how they're different from the original colouring system. So first thing that you'll notice is the barrel shape is a honeycomb shape, and this is an ergonomic design. It's designed to be comfortable in your hand for extended periods of colouring. Then the second thing that you'll notice is this lovely brush nib, and that's what we like for colouring. At the other end is a small nib, and they've put this on the actual package here so that you know, small nib this way, large nib that way, and this has got a lovely fine nib on it, which makes it super easy to get into those fiddly bits. Now the great thing about these pens, just like with their original system, is that they're refillable. So if you use alcohol markers all the time, these are meant to have 25% more fluid in them, so they last longer. But if you use alcohol markers, like you might use Bics or Sharpies, you'll find that they dry out, so you have to buy a new alcohol marker. Whereas with these ones, all you do is take out the nib, so you just pull it out at the other end, and get some of the refill fluid, which is really quite cheap, and that'll refill the marker, you know, 10 or 15 times, and you just refill it all up. Now you can replace the brush nibs as well, which you can't do with your Sharpies or your Bics, and they also don't have a brush point on them. So these might cost a little bit more in the beginning, but if you do a lot of colouring with alcohol-based markers, they're certainly the way to go, because you're not replacing the marker each time, you're just refilling it with ink, and you've also got the advantage of a brush point and a very fine point, so you don't have to buy 2 sets of like Sharpies with a fine point, and you can replace the nibs, so once it gets a bit worn, you can replace it. Now these are far better for adult colouring because they don't have that chisel tip, which, you know, unless you're using, you know, big quotes or something like that, you wouldn't really use a chisel tip that much, you'd use a brush tip more. So let's have a look at the actual colours. They come in these little packets, and at the end of the barrel the colours are shown on there, and that's at both ends, so it doesn't matter how you pick it up. Both of the colours are shown there. Now I do have to say that it's kind of inconvenient putting them all into the packets all the time, so I will be putting mine into a storage system, and they make these little shelves that you can put them on so you can easily see them. The way Spectrum Noir have designed these are that they work with their other range of markers, which are the graphic set, and they also work with the original markers from the original colouring system. So that means that you might have some that are round from this set and some that are from the Illustrator set, and you can sort of mix them all up and they all have the same colours and work well together. They have a colouring system, so you'll notice at the end of each barrel it has a name. So for example this one, which is khaki, and then it has a number, which is YG1. So the way Spectrum Noir set out their system is colours are divided into colour families, and there's 29 colour families. So YG, for instance, denotes the yellow-green colour family, and then we've got the 1 next to it. So a number 1 to 10 is assigned to each marker, and 1 is the lightest colour and 10 is the darkest colour. So YG1 tells me that this is a really light colour in the yellow-green family. So if I want to get a seamless blend and the colours work together, I choose a colour from the same colour family. So I might have YG1 as my lightest colour, then say YG3 as my medium tone, and then say YG8, I'm just making up numbers by the way, as my darker tone, and they all start with YG, so they're in the same colour family, so they'll all blend up and look beautiful together. And then the colour, the tone, denotes what number it is. So we always want 3 tones when working with markers: a lighter shade, a medium shade and a darker shade. If there's too much of a jump between any of those shades that you're using, then you should use 4 colours so that you can get a seamless blend. You see the colours are also on here on the front. We'll just go through and we'll have a look at each packet so that you can get an idea of what's in this range. And you can always just buy a packet of 6, or you can buy them individually and test them out and see if you like them or not, see if they suit your needs. But the nib is, you know, the big selling point with these, that brush nib and that lovely fine nib at the end. So when blending these, ideally you blend the markers in the same colour family. Now the thing is a little bit difficult to understand initially is that they don't make these packets in the one colour family. So as you can see, we've got ones from the colour family of GY, PP, B for brown, L over here, and C for citrus over here. So there's quite a few different colour families in the one packet. So if you're buying them, just make sure that you get packets that have those 3 or 4 colours within the same colour family to produce a seamless blend. Now you can blend outside of the colour family, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. This one's our Essentials pack, and it's got the blender pen in it. Now the blender pen for any alcohol-based marker, whether it's this brand or another brand, it doesn't work as a blender pen that you might think of when you're thinking of colour pencils. In fact, it's more of an eraser pen, so it actually takes colour away. So you can use it to create background effects by laying down some alcohol-based markers and then using the blender pen to remove colour so that you create like white dots or white patches. Now if you make small little mistakes with your alcohol-based markers, you can also use the blender pen to push the ink back and sort of remove the excess colour that you've put down. Now, as you'll see from the video that follows this, that is a knack that I certainly have not perfected, but it is my first go with the markers. Now, Spectrum Noir do recommend using their own paper to use alcohol markers with, as most, product creators always do, because they create something in mind for use with their own products. Because if you use like normal copy paper, you'll find with the alcohol markers that they just sop up and they tend to go out of the lines and the paper just absorbs the marker and you can't really get a blend happening. Now, depending on what you've got at home, watercolour paper can sometimes be good, but you need to experiment and see, which watercolour paper you might like to use. They do have on their website an FAQ section that sets out the types of paper that you should use with the markers. And I've got to say, initially I did my colour swatch on cheap copy paper and instantly regretted it because it did start to peel and it just sopped everywhere. I didn't have the Spectrum Noir colour cardstock for alcohol-based markers, so I used Express Blending Card, and you can immediately notice the difference. If you use the right product, trust me, you'll be able to blend, and it's bleed proof, and so your alcohol markers aren't coming through to the other side. Now that's great if you're using colouring books where it's a PDF download and you can choose your own paper, but if it's in books, then they're going to bleed through to the other side of the paper generally, because colouring book paper is just generally not suited for alcohol-based markers. Now I know everyone's going to sort of ask, how do the Spectrum Noir compare with the Copics? So I've got to say I love these, and I just wish they were easier to get in Australia. They're actually a little bit difficult for me to get here, especially in individual ones. So we'll just have a look at them up against each other. So we've got the Spectrum Noir Illustrator marker there, one from the original set, and you can see that they're roughly the same. They've both got a tip on the end of the barrel. The barrel on the Illustrator denotes the actual nib choice over here. And they've both got that sort of ergonomic design, but the one on the original system is a round tip and this is the honeycomb tip. But other than that, they're very similar in design. And, if you've got some of these, you can use these and switch them around. Now here's the Copic Chow, and you can see that it's a similar sort of length, but the barrel is actually smaller. And here it is up against the Copic Sketch, and you can see that the Sketch has a flatter type barrel, but it also is coloured at both ends. Now the thing with the Copics is that they actually don't have the same sort of nibs. So we have the brush nib, which is what we're looking for colouring, but on the other end we have a chisel tip. Now the other thing that you should notice as well is that the Copic Sketch retains more fluid than the Copic Chow, so you need to refill this one more often than the Sketch one. But you'll notice that the Illustrator barrel is bigger, so it's about nearly a centimetre bigger. So therefore it retains more fluid, so you don't need to change it as much. So you can refill these less often than you do with the Copics. So if you use them quite regularly, that might be an issue for you. Both of them have replaceable nibs, but the Copic Sketch has this chisel nib with the brush point, whereas the Illustrator has this lovely little fine nib, which is great for doing itty bitty little things that we often want to colour with our little colouring designs. So the price is, of course, a difference as well. So that's our chisel nib, and that's our brush. And here is our Copic. And again, the chow, the smaller model, the barrel on that is a lot smaller, has the chisel nib and the brush, so you still don't have that fine point. So I'll just show you my colour swatch. When I purchased these, there are only 96 colours in the pack, and then the remaining colours that make up 216 in the series were released as individuals. So of course I would like to get all of the rest of them. I'm a little bit OCD like that. I like to have complete sets of things. It upsets me if I don't have them. Just show you how to blend with them and how they blend. So I just used the Spectrum Noir Coloristic colouring pads that they provided to me. Now these are designed for pencils, not markers, but I like to be a bit adventurous, so I'm using that. Now to blend with the markers, usually you choose 3 colours or 4 colours, a light, a mid and a dark tone, so that you can blend them out beautifully together and seamlessly. Now that works well if they're in the same colour family, but if they're not in the same colour family, you need to do what's called palette blending. So basically that's just to get a bit of plastic or one of those plastic stamp crafters blocks and scribble a bit of colour onto it, and you can pick that up with a colourless blender. You can also scribble a bit of lighter colour on there and pick it up with a darker colour, and it comes out as a gradient colour, so the lighter moves then into the darker colour. So you can see I'm using a mixture of both of those techniques, either picking it up with the colourless blender or picking it up with a lighter colour. Now that colourless blender you can use in the background as well, or in other areas, so you can use it to lighten up a colour. So I've used it on the background here to put in little white dots to try and get a dreamy effect. But you can also use it to fix up little mistakes. So if you've gone out of the lines, you sort of blot the blender pen over it and try and push the colour back in. Now, I didn't have my glasses on when I did this, so it interferes with the camera, so I don't wear them, so I went out of the lines pretty badly. And I tried to fix it with the blender pen, but I think I got a little bit carried away and put a bit too much on, and it was probably a bit too big to fix with the blender pen. But I wanted to show you anyway so that you didn't make the same sort of mistake as I made. And it does take a little bit of getting used to. This is the first time I've ever used the blender pen in that way. You know, like all things, they do take a bit of getting used to. But you can see from the video how juicy the markers are and how easily they colour. One of the great things about those foil pads too is that you can colour straight over that foil and it resists, and so you can just dab off any colour with your finger and it doesn't go onto the foil and stain it. So I hope you've enjoyed that speed colouring of the little picture from the Colorist pad. So until next time, happy colouring.